This is the day. This is the moment the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. Hey, what's that yellow bright thing in the sky we saw this morning? Isn't that amazing? Hey, good morning, everybody. Here we are less than a week into a brand new year. And I need to tell you something. You've already helped me out immensely. On this first Sunday of a brand new year, you've not only helped me with today's opening talk, but you've helped me with this series of conversations we're getting ready to have between now and Valentine's Day. We're calling moments. Moments matter. They just do. Back to that in just a moment. If you're brand new here, you came at Christmas, today's your first Sunday, you're watching online. My name is Stan Coleman, and I'm privileged to be the lead pastor of this amazing place of grace called West Cobb Church. We're a community of imperfect people gathered together as a faith family to help people find and follow the one that we have found and that we follow, which is Jesus Christ. I need to brag on you for just a moment, West Cobbers, okay? You guys were amazing. Christmas at West Cobb was off the hook from the Christmas Coffee House weekend. Ladies, you know the women's Christmas luncheon was unbelievable. The Christmas offering given to the mission of our church, which today's the kind of the last day to give toward that. All of that plus, many of you, and you even came up to me and said, Pastor, I did it. You sat one, served one, and invited one. You sat one service for Christmas Eve, you served one service or more, and you invited we had almost 1,000 people, even though the schedule wasn't great for Christmas Eve, attend our Christmas Eve experiences. I met dozens and dozens and dozens of newcomers, friends, family members. Hey, let's give it up for Christmas at West Cobb. You did amazing. You're great at inviting people. In fact, anytime you see these cards at the seats, these are invite cards. These are not just to put in your purse, ladies, or your wallet, men, and never give out. The message of the gospel is good news. And for some, I even met a wonderful couple this morning. They said, you know, we hardly even knew this church existed, even though we live in this area. This is a secret that a lot of people don't know about, and this is the year of the invite. And by the way, if you've been brand new to our church or coming for months or even years, but have never attended our Discover West Cobb, this will be the first opportunity of the year and the last time we'll ever do it this way. Because this coming spring, we're gonna open up a brand new way that we're gonna move people into their spiritual journey. So this will be the last chance. Next Sunday, following the 11 o'clock service, we'll have a complimentary meal, a kid-friendly food, all of that. You'll learn more about the mission, vision, values of our church and what your next step would be. And so if that's you, do yourself right now and me a favor, and on the connection card, let us know down the bottom that you'll attend Discover West Cobb. You can tear that off, and then you can drop it in one of the boxes on the way out because the basket already got passed. Now, a moment ago, I shared with you that you've already helped me with today's opening talk. And I'm gonna tell you why. For whatever reason, it seems like we're always looking for the biggie. We're always looking for the supersize. We're always looking for the mother load. We're always looking for the ginormous moments of life. What I've discovered over 6 decades of living and almost 5 decades of ministry is that life is made up not just of those big, like ladies, red carpet moments or men's Super Bowl championship moments, that life is more made up of the smaller moments that can literally make you or break you. And so what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be gathering together, we're gonna be talking some about what the Lord impressed upon me in regard to this. And the reason this moment matters is the moment that you decided last night, sometime when the Cowboys were winning the game, I'm just saying, all right, that you were going to attend church. You may not have known this, you may not have seen it this way. You made a willful decision to make the most of this moment in your life. You chose to be here, and without maybe knowing it, you're asking God's favor and God's grace upon you in 2019 and beyond. That's extremely important for all of you. So much so, in our listening guide today, if you're taking notes, the first one is this: moments matter. They do. Kim Kardashian, last year, her main goal for the coming year, she said, be on my phone less and be more in the moment. And what she was saying, whether you are a Kardashian fan of that clan or whatever, doesn't matter. What she's saying is, I need to do less of this social media, smartphone interaction. I need to be more in the moments of life because they mean more than maybe I think they do. And here's the other thing that I would say to that, and see if you're tracking with me today. It's the smallest moments that can actually make the biggest difference. Again, it's not just the red carpet moments. It's not just the, walk down an aisle moment. It's not just the Super Bowl championship moments, man. It's the smallest moments that can actually allow God to change your life and shape your life for your future if you'll respond to and relate to and embrace the moment that comes your way. A month ago today, I'm asleep in our king-size bed off Burn Hickory Road. And it's 3 a.m, and not even Jesus is awake at that hour, right? And the Lord wakes me up. Has this ever happened to you? Yeah, certainly you could go to the restroom. That's too much information, Pastor. Certainly you could do any number of things. It's 3 a.m. You generally are going to go back to sleep. But the Lord prompts me. He wakes me up. And in less than 30 seconds, I believe the Lord gave me the 7 most meaningful moments of your life from this moment on. And I took such copious notes. I wrote every one of those 7 moments. In less than 30 seconds, he gave me every single one of those moments. And early that morning, I made a commitment, not just to go back to bed, although I did, but to share those 7 moments with you, with the hopes and the prayers that you would make the most of your moments, that you learn to respond and embrace to the moments that matter. That's what we're going to be doing in our time together. Now, without overstating or over-exaggerating in any way, these 7 moments will happen to each and every one of you under the sound of my voice. No matter how young or old, how cool or not so cool, how introvert or extrovert, how religious or irreligious you may think you are, every one of us are going to face these 7 moments at some point in the future in our lives. The next statement in your listening guide is that moments can either develop you or defeat you. I believe God allows these moments to develop you. God longs to develop you and grow you, not to defeat you or discourage you or disappoint you. And so we're going to lean into these moments and talk about these moments and create some moments, some sacred moments here in this place of grace together. And I would highly recommend for those of you who make resolutions in the new year, one family last year, they told me, Pastor, we were very spontaneous, not very consistent in our attendance the last few years at our church. But after your arrival, we decided last year, every Sunday we were in town, we were going to be at church. And they said, their words, that changed our lives this year. It radically changed our heart, our soul, our spirit. It made a difference in our marriage, in our family. And I would just say, between now and Valentine's Day, could you just make a commitment to surrender and say, Lord, if I'm in town and I don't get the crud that's been going around and left in bed, that I would be consistently in a place where I would learn about the next moment that you have for me. Hope you'll do that. Now today, we're going to be asking each and every week this question: how do I make the most of this moment? How do I make the most of this moment? And today we're going to talk about what I call a moment of, this is the first word the Lord gave me, a moment of transition. You know that life is full of transitions, right? You go from grade school to high school to college, transitions. Some of us transition from single life to married life. A little later, we transition from no kids to a smelly diaper everywhere we turn, right? Is a transition to a new job or to having no job. There might be a transition in a relationship. There might be a translation of an empty nest. It'll happen eventually, and you'll be glad when it does, Mom and Dad. There may be a transition of going into retirement. Maybe a transition coming back out of retirement for whatever reason. I'm just saying that life is full of transitions, and I would contend that every single one of us right here, right now, are going through a transition of some kind. Now, for some of you, it may not be a huge transition like you're going to walk down the aisle and say, I do. It might not be a brand new job. It might not be that big, but it's big in God's eyes because it's a brand new year. And the new year is always a time of transition into another season. Seasons come and seasons go. They say rainy seasons come, and thankfully rainy seasons go. Hopefully this week we'll have no rain, they say. But no matter what season, look what God says through the Old Testament prophet Zechariah. Do not despise small beginnings. Why? For the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. Some of you feel like, man, I'm not going through that big of a transition. Some of you are, but some of you aren't. But every single transition is important to God and matters to God, and it should matter to you. Today, though, how do we make the most of a transitional moment? And to get there, we're going to go to basically a week in the life of the history of ancient Israel. And we're going to discover one of the greatest transitions in the history of the world, and we're going to try to apply it to our own transition. To get there, I want to take you back for just a moment. For 40 years, the children of Israel have been wandering aimlessly around in a barren desert. God has told them that one day that they will cross over the Jordan River into what? The land of promise, the promised land. That they'll no longer live in tents in a barren desert, that there will be a land flowing with milk and honey. Every promise God has ever given you, every resource you could possibly need will be in that land. I promise you it will, God says. And yet for 4 decades or so, there's been roadblocks and setbacks for that promise to occur. And some of you today, you know God made a promise to you maybe years ago, and for whatever reason, there's been roadblocks and setbacks and delays and detours and difficulties. But God has a plan, and God had a plan for Israel. It was going to take a great amount of transition for them to get where they were to where God had them. Moses, their great leader, had died. And Joshua, his apprentice, has taken charge now. So this is going to be a game-changing, transitional moment for all of Israel and for our boy, Joshua. We pick this up in Joshua chapter 1, verse 1. After the death of Moses, the Lord's servant, the Lord spoke to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant. Moses, my servant, is dead. Now you and all the people prepare. If you're taking notes in your outline, circle the word prepare. Transition takes preparation. Now you and all the people prepare to cross over the Jordan to the land I am giving the Israelites. Notice this statement, I have given. God's already saying, it's already yours. I've already given it to you. You just haven't possessed it yet. I have given you every place where the sole of your foot treads, just as I promised Moses. Your territory will be from the wilderness and Lebanon to the great river, the Euphrates River, all the land of the Hittites, and west to the Mediterranean Sea. No one will be able to stand against you as long as you live. I will be with you. Just as I was with Moses, I will not leave you or abandon you. God says, in effect, Joshua, what you have gone through and all of Israel have gone through these 40 years have all been a part of the plan. And I know that Moses, the great leader, is dead, but I'm not done with you. I'm not done with the people of Israel. Remember, Moses didn't believe me, and for that I told him he'd never go into the promised land. But you're believing me. And now's the time for you to make this transition. God says, are you ready? Are you in, Josh? And right now, you may be at a time of transition, and you may be facing a transition, and God is maybe parenthetically asking you, are you in? Are you ready for this great transition? I won't leave you orphaned. I won't leave you abandoned. I'll be with you just as I've been with you in the past, God says. And what's interesting is that God isn't asking Joshua or Israel to do anything new. Think about this. These are not new marching orders. Like a newsflash, they just heard they're going to go into the promised land. 40 years earlier, it was supposed to be a 2-week journey into the promised land, and 2 weeks turned into 40 years. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Man, it's just like, oh my goodness, what in the world? And we're taking another lap around Mount Sinai. And God doesn't want you to keep taking laps going nowhere fast. And so God is asking, inviting these people, reminding them that there's this barrier between where they've been and where God's taking them. And in this case, it was symbolic and literal. It was the Jordan River. They had to get through, across the Jordan River to make their transition. And there's a good chance right now, even as I speak, whatever your current set of reality is, wherever you are in your marriage, wherever you are in your relationships, wherever you are in your finances, wherever you are in your career pathway, that there's a transitional moment that you're going to have to take to get from here to there, and there's a gap right now. But for whatever reason, because of fear or insecurity or rebellion or blatant sinfulness or, just not trusting God, whatever it might be, you have stayed where you are for too long, and God has clearly laid out a pathway. It's not a new pathway, likely. He's let you know this before, and now it's an opportunity for you to call on God's favor, to rely on God's resources and his power. So knowing exactly what Joshua is going to need, and knowing exactly what you and I are going to need in our times of transition, here's how the story continues, verse 6. Be strong and courageous, for you will distribute the land I swore to their fathers to give them as an inheritance. Above all, be strong and very courageous to observe carefully the whole instruction my servant Moses commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, so that you will have success wherever you go. This book of instruction must not depart from your mouth. You are to meditate on it day and night, so that you may carefully observe everything written in it, for then you will prosper and succeed in whatever you do. Haven't I commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but 3 different times, in a span of just a few short verses, God repeats for effect a little phrase. Did you notice it? He says in verse 6, be strong and courageous. The next verse, he adds a little adverb, be strong and very courageous. And then he ends with this classic verse, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged. Why? For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Friends, in times of transition, this is very important to understand. Courage comes and goes in times of transition. You'll have to hold on for the next supply. I'll say that again. Courage comes and goes in times of transition. You're going to have to hold on for the next supply. 2 years ago this week, God was speaking to my wife and I. We'd already released our church by faith. God had already told us to release it by faith. We didn't know where in the world we would go. I didn't have a resume, hadn't had one for 32 years. And suddenly we found out about West Cobb Church. This is a huge transition from being the founding pastor of this place of grace called South Palm Church to a place we'd never been, though we've driven through, up the corridor, up to Blue Ridge, and love the area, have friends that lived in the Atlanta area. And it was a transitional moment. It was going to take courage not only to release our past, but courage to walk into our future, to go from where we were to where God had wanted us to be. And you know what I've noticed? Courage comes and goes during times of transition. So we've had to hold on for the next supply. It's not like, well, once you walk the aisle, the honeymoon starts and it'll be there for at least 7 years. No, that's not the way it really works. You kind of wake up the next day and go, what did we do? Transition, you need courage. And so God knows this. Armed with this great promise from God, Joshua is about to be tested on God's promise. It's very likely right now, some of you are experiencing a test of transition. There's going to be a test. And God is allowing some transition tests to see if it's real for you, to see if you're really going to walk by faith and not by sight. So he adds to the test some marching orders. of how it's going to happen in their time of transition. Now I'm going to fast forward to chapter 3, and I'm going to read to you just a few verses. Now, Joshua, God says, choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. The priest will carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth. Watch this. As soon as their feet touch the water, that is the Jordan River, the flow of water will be cut off upstream, and the river will stand up like a wall. Hold on for just a minute, God. Joshua must be thinking. You know I just took charge, and I'm not even sure they trust me yet. You want me to take 12 of my best men, and you want me to go down to the Jordan River, and you want us to walk through the raging river with the Ark of the Covenant in our arms to get to the other side? Could you not have asked Moses to begin a bridge building project like 40 years ago? Could you not give me supernatural ability like you will one day with Jesus to walk on the water over it instead of going through it, Lord? I mean, I'm not gonna have any floaties. There are no pontoon boats. But this is the next step that God is asking Joshua to take. And he's saying, I want you to confidently and courageously do what I've asked you to do in your moment of transition. West Cobb, listen. It's likely that God is asking you to just take the next step for your transition, to just take the next step and trust him, to be courageous. Because what happened next will define not only Joshua as a leader, but it will define future generations to come. It's a defining moment in this story, and it's likely that this next transition for you could be a defining moment in your story for generations to come as well, because moments matter. Some of you are right there right now. I've got some people I'm meeting with who are getting ready to get married. It's a transitional moment. I've been meeting with some men who have brand new opportunities in the job place, a transitional moment. I don't know what the moment is for you. But the question is, am I gonna press into the moment? Am I gonna lean into the moment? Am I gonna make the most of the moment, or I'm gonna shrink back and say, wait a minute, it's drier over here. It's not as conflicted. There's not as much problems. And so I think I'll just stay where I am. You know, you can't stay where you are and go on with God at the same time. Henry Blackaby taught us that decades ago through experiencing God. You cannot stay where you are and go on with God. You can stay where you are, but you can't stay where you are and go on with God. So God isn't done with Joshua and the people of Israel. God isn't done with you, and he isn't done with me. So he creates a transitional opportunity and a test. I'm going to condense this because of time. Joshua is now standing on the edge of the Jordan River, and he's going to have to get across the Jordan River to enter into the land of promise. Joshua needs to be reminded that I'm going to give you all the strength and all the courage. And I'm just guessing today that wherever you are in your journey, there's been some fear and some uncertainty. God longs to give you strength and courage to make it to the other side of your transition. But here's where things get really interesting. Joshua says, he tells the story, because that's why it's called the book of Joshua in the Old Testament. Joshua's telling the story. It would be one thing for God to say, I want you to do this during the summer, during dry season. But Joshua, as he's recording the story, it's the harvest time. It's when there's been the most rain. It's been like the flood stage, class 5 rapids. I mean, it'd be one thing, men, for ladies, those of us who fished, for God to say, okay, I want you to, this summer, I want you to put on your little hip waders and kind of walk into the Chattahoochee and go fishing. Okay, that's one thing. But to do that today, after 70 inches of rain this year, you'd be nuts. You'd be swallowed up. You'd be floating downstream. They'd be writing about you in the AJC, because that'd be nuts. But yet, here is Joshua. God gives the instructions for him to make the transition. And instead of waiting for the dry season, Lord, could you not wait for the dry season? Here's why God's not going to wait for the dry season. His timing's perfect, yours isn't. Plus, you could make it on your own during the dry season. You're going to need God's hand and God's help to get through to the other side. And Joshua knows this, and God knows this. Just this clear instruction to take the next step and see what I might do. So this is the point where we're at in our story. We're in a moment of desperation. We're in a moment of impossible. Lord, I'm not even sure I can make it over there. I'm not even sure about this transition. I'm not even sure I really heard from you. And while God always fulfills his promises, listen, this premise of waiting on the Lord and trusting the Lord and watching him work. And again, all of this is by faith because God has already said it's yours. I've already made this available to you. And all I'm asking you to do is get to the edge of the Jordan River and to put your toe in the Jordan River, and then I'm going to go to work on your behalf. Really, Lord? Yeah. That's what God says. And so what happens next? God says, I'm going to make a way where there seems to be no way. I'm going to help you and each man that you pick along with the Ark of the Covenant. Think about this. They're carrying the Ark of the Covenant. You Indiana Jones fans, the Ark represents the future of the nation of Israel. It's very horrifying to think about that they could easily get with the raging rapids, the class 5 rapids, that somehow they could lose the hope of a nation right there if they don't do it the right way. So transitions can be very, very fearful, which is why God 3 times says you're going to need to be strong and courageous. You're going to need to be strong and very courageous. You don't need to be afraid or discouraged. Why? Because you need to be strong and courageous. Why? Because I'm going to be with you wherever you go. Courage comes and goes. In times of transition, you're going to have to hold on for the next supply. And so what happens next is stunning to think about. The Bible says, Joshua picks out one man from each of the 12 tribes. And I want you to picture these 12 men. These are priests, which are generally not the most athletically gifted in the group, going down with the Ark of the Covenant, the raging class 5 rapids. Joshua says it's been raining and all the rain's coming off Mount Hermon. The riverbed is swollen now. It's over its banks. And then what happens next is incredible. Verse 15, when the priests got to the Jordan and their feet touched the water at the edge, the flow of water stopped. It piled up in a heap a long way off. The river went dry. Do any of you remember 40 years earlier, the Red Sea? You've got the Egyptians coming after you. There's about 1 million people, and Moses raises his rod and says, God, and the Red Sea parts, and they walk across on dry land 40 years ago. 40 years fast forward now, and God says, when you do what I've asked you to do, when your feet touch the water, I will work a miracle in your life. Some of you are waiting for God to do it all, and God is waiting for you to do what he's already told you to do, to trust him, to be strong and very courageous. And it is through this mighty miracle that God is teaching me and God is teaching you that I am doing this to develop you, not to defeat you or destroy you. I'm doing this to grow you, to give you all the promises that I want to have be fulfilled in your life. If you want to see my power, if you want to see my supernatural favor, you're going to have to take the step of transition. You're going to have to take the spiritual risk of trusting me when it doesn't make sense. You're going to have to be strong and courageous in your moment of transition. One of the greatest stories of transition in the history of Israel. Now you, now me. Where are you in your moment of transition? Where are you right now where God, sink or swim, live or die, you're gonna have to show up because I can't do this on my own. That's what God is up to. Total dependence and reliance upon his favor and his resources is what you're going to need. You're going to need to be strong and courageous, strong and very courageous. You're not going to need to be afraid or discouraged because the Lord your God will not orphan you or abandon you. He will be with you. Just as he was with Moses, I will be with you. And there's a good chance right now that some of you are facing a huge moment of transition. There's a good chance that some of you would say, Pastor, mine isn't quite as big as mine have been in the past, but there is a moment of transition. Because I'll say it again, no matter how young or how old, how cool or not so cool, how introvert or extrovert you are, no matter where you are in your spiritual journey, every one of us are going through a transition of some kind. And in a moment, I'm gonna pray with you about that going into 2019. I've asked the band, Jacob, to come. There's a song that we've done over the couple years that I've been here that I love. I want you to allow these words to breathe into you. This incredible passage, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. As we reflect, Lord, how do I make the most of this moment of transition in my life? All over this room, would you bow your heads for just a moment? How many of you would say, Pastor, I think I'm either going into a transition or I'm in a transition or I might be coming out of a transition? That's me right now. Would you just lift your hands real high so I can see them all over this room? Let me pray with you and for you a New Year's prayer. Our Father in heaven, thank you that moments matter and that you allow moments in our lives to develop us, not to defeat us, to make us better, not to make us bitter. And God's very likely that this transition is not a new marching order. It's something that you've been unveiling for quite a while. And it's just that now you're going to give all the supernatural power, all the resources brought to bear, even in a season where it doesn't make sense, to help us go through the transition to get to the other side. So I pray for my friends who are honest enough on this first Sunday of a brand new year to say, that's me. I'm in a transition of some kind, going into it, coming out of it, in it. There's a conflict, there's a challenge, there's a current reality. And so, Father, I pray that just as you've been with them before, that you would be with them in this moment, that you wouldn't leave them orphaned or abandoned, that you'd help them be very strong and very courageous, to not be afraid or discouraged to make the move. For you, the Lord God, are with them wherever they may go. God, if they need a new supply of courage, would you give it beginning today? Because it comes and goes. For others, Lord, help them hold on for the next supply. And thank you that you give it to us through the power of your Son, Jesus Christ, in whose name we all pray. Amen.